Welcome everyone. Welcome to this new initiative, Xpirit Talks. This is the first episode. The idea came that we like to share knowledge, and often this knowledge sharing happens in just during dinner or at the coffee machine, where you talk to your colleagues and talk about new technology or just cool stuff that you worked with at your client or you just read about. So what our idea is let's do this online, share it with everyone, so they can learn from certain people that know something already from a certain topic. So the first topic that we're going to cover today is Azure Container Apps. It's a new technology that's quite a lot of fuzz about. So I thought let's use this as our first topic and see, is this something everyone else should also learn or look into right now, or is it something that we should pass on? So it's in preview now. So Luke, can you give us a quick introduction on what's the idea behind Azure Container Apps and
sure.
What is that?
So we've all probably had this project, maybe a couple of projects that wants to run stuff inside a container. And in the old days, we had 10 options, and now we have 11. So that's always better, have more options.
Mm-hmm.
This one fits in somewhere between app services running containers and full-blown Kubernetes. So what Container Apps is really just managed Kubernetes, but then just one part on a managed Kubernetes environment. So if you're familiar with Kubernetes, then you know that a pod is like a group of containers collaborating and sharing a network interface. This is what Container Apps gives you in a nutshell.
And it's a managed Kubernetes, but what does it add for you as a developer? Why would I choose this over just app services and running a container in that?
This is my opinion, by the way, now.
Yeah.
At this point, I would definitely not recommend choosing it over anything, because it's not done yet. It's in preview. Sometimes stuff that is in preview is ready to go into production, but this is not yet. So they're still working on it. But it is very promising. So if you do need the scalability mostly the scalability of Kubernetes, then this is a very good option in the near future. So what it brings you is the way to scale from 0 to many in a matter of seconds based on KEDA. KEDA is a way to trigger scaling based on input. And input could be request queue length, message queue size, that sort of stuff.
HTTP messages, etc.
Yeah.
Also CPU load or memory.
CPU load, memory load. And you scale based on those metrics in a very gradual scale.
And the most important difference with a regular container instance, in my opinion, is that you can scale this back to 0. Container instances requires you to reserve hardware capacity, and you pay for it all month. And this, if you scale back to 0, you start paying just an availability fee and not a full compute fee.
Yeah, so you mentioned it being kind of a lightweight Kubernetes option, as you could say, or managed Kubernetes option.
Sure.
Can you use all the features of Kubernetes then?
No.
Like volume mounts or...
Not yet.
Because KEDA can also run in full-blown Kubernetes, and it can also scale down my Kubernetes cluster to 0 or even stop it. So
I think Kubernetes will always have more features than this has, right? This is just if you need like the 80-20 rule, right? If you need 80% of the people don't need all the feature that Kubernetes brings, and Kubernetes does bring a lot of overhead, a lot of complexity that you need to manage yourself. Setting up security in Kubernetes, doing updates, all those things on the infrastructure level, I really don't like to do. If Microsoft can do that for us in Azure Container Apps, that would be great.
I agree that it would be great, but I think as long as it can do all the features like the workloads, so there are a lot of workloads that you can run in Kubernetes. Those are tried and tested. If you look at the CNCF landscape, for example, it would be nice to have at least 80% of the landscape to run in container apps, because then you have a broad set of applications which can run inside of your container app, and then it really becomes an option.
Yeah, what I think Microsoft is aiming for is this using mainly for your own containers and not that much running, for example, Vitesse as a database. I don't think they're aiming for also running those kind of loads in Azure Container. I'm not sure. What do you think?
Well, again, still this time no, but maybe in the future if they get this whole volume mount stuff into working order, then you can start thinking of running all kinds of data storage inside that managed environment.
Yeah.
Well, the cool thing is it's not just one part, right? So what you can do with container apps is run a bunch of pods hooked up with like local host networking. So it's not a true VNet, but they can talk to each other as long as they are in the same environment.
As they're deployed in the same deployment, they form together an internal network, and all those pods in the network can talk to each other.
Right.
So in fact, we're not talking about pods, we're talking about deployments.
Yeah, and there's no real VNet support yet, right? So it is an internal network created within the
It's
Azure.
an internal network, and if you want to have communications from the outside, so we want to have ingress communication, then two more things need to be set up at the Kubernetes level. Which is, for example, the ingress and an ingress service. And the ingress service is a translation between pods listening to a certain port and a certain name, and the ingress itself, it's a port which is opened on the outside, so you can talk through all kinds of ports to the pods internally in your network.
Yeah, but you can't attach it on the private network to, just let's say, the customer network just yet.
No, so ingress is built in, so it's just an option. Do you want to expose this container to the outside? Yes, and that's about it. So it's very easy to do, but it doesn't have that much options yet. We don't know where it will form into, but it's a lot easier to just create your container in a deployment and then send that to container apps, and it should just work. You can expose it to the internet immediately. I think what we're looking for is exposing this within your own VNet, so you can connect it to other services running in your network or maybe on premises even. So that's not in there, and it's on the public roadmap that they're working on that now. So
do we know what they're using? Because they're using KDA, which is it's just
so underneath it's just a Kubernetes cluster, of course. So.
Yeah, but they're using KDA for the scaling. So if you look at the scale of the KDA documentation, you can just use the same rules and apply them to the container apps scaling. If you know what ingress,
they use Envoy, I think.
Oh, Envoy. Okay, so then you can maybe they will expose an Envoy configuration map or something like that you can actually tweak the ingress.
Yeah, they have some. Maybe look, you have the documentation there. So if you look at what they currently have, they don't call it deployments as you would in Kubernetes, but you can define your apps, and the apps have certain revisions, and each revision can have its own ingress rules as well. So you can create multiple versions of the same app and send like 99% of the traffic to one revision and then 1% to the other, for example. That can only be done through like basic rules, only percentage of the traffic at this moment. I would hope that they expose more of that later on as well, so you can shape that by header values, for example, or only send those to a certain version instead of the others.
It's probably coming. We gave some feedback, of course. So, well, that's for ingress, it's pretty limited. But also on the back-end side, if you want to connect to an on-premise resource or a database, SQL Azure database, then there's no way to do that yet. So there's no private link support, no managed identity support, which is also a big thing, well, to me at least.
Yeah, I would assume like managed identity would be there when they go GA, right? That's one of the core features that's in almost all Azure services now? Or?
Yeah, I would kind of hope so, because that will enable you to authenticate yourself with the database and maybe do a key vault. It would make life a lot simpler, but also much more secure, because you can use private link in that situation, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So what you don't have in Kubernetes, you can have your underlying infrastructure maybe expand over multiple regions and those kind of things. There's nothing in here yet for high availability either, right? You can say, I want to have this application or this container run in 3 instances, for example, but you can't define I want this in this region, or I want 2 of the 3 in North Europe and one in, or split them up over multiple regions. I would hope that they also add that to this, or at least like make this high available. True.
Agreed. Yeah. So, but
for abstracting things away anyway. So then,
I think what you're looking at is really just the absolute minimum value product. But Kubernetes is leaking through. So you see stuff like deployments and pods and ingress, and so they need to find a way to cut away from Kubernetes and then start thinking at a new level.
I think you actually don't see pods in the Azure Container Apps.
It's right there in the docs, right? So
they mix up the terms.
Yeah. So once they start realizing that Kubernetes on one Azure region is not good enough, like this Azure front door style global resource, then it becomes a lot more fun.
Yeah, or underneath it will become two environments of a container.
Sure, whatever.
In 2 different regions with a managed front door on top of it.
Sure,
but what you also can do is deploy different Kubernetes nodes on different regions, combine it as a single instance, a single Kubernetes instance, and then you have global availability too. So that could be an option. I think Microsoft actually wants to stay as close to Kubernetes as possible, as it's the most used technology at the moment.
But then that should all be abstracted away for us, the developers, right? I just want to create an Azure Container App and say I want to have this application available.
But then you could work with, for example, in Kubernetes you have a thing called node affinity, in which you can tell to your deployment on which node it should run. And if you want, for example, I can imagine a scenario in which you want to have a globally available Kubernetes high availability environment. That you can say, okay, I want to have this in the region West Europe, in North Europe, and that's it will deploy resources on nodes in West Europe, in North Europe. That can all be within the same, within the existing technology of Kubernetes.
Yeah, I agree that Kubernetes can do this, but I hope that Microsoft would also implement this into this tool, so it's just there as a feature for us to use. Like we choose one region, now you create an Azure container environment first, right? That's your container, I would say, but that's the wrong word. It's the group of your
containers which are using the same network.
Yeah, so I would just want to say for this environment, I want to focus on West Europe, but have a fallback region in North Europe, for example. And then then it should be smart enough to create multiple node pools, and when one node pool fails, move the nodes to the other one.
The term node affinity or things like that, you don't want them to leak through, because then people have to know the Kubernetes, and then they just choose your Kubernetes. And there's no benefit in choosing container apps. If I have the new Kubernetes terms to use container apps, then I will always use Kubernetes, because then I have all the options.
But if you can say, for example, I want to have my application to be running in, for example, East US and West Europe.
Yeah, then it's abstracted away in the service. Then it's fine. But when Kubernetes terms leak through, then I will always choose Kubernetes, because then I still have the same learning curve.
Yeah. So I hope they, in their documentation, etc., also remove the terms like pod, because it's not needed. You don't need a pod. If you just create this using Bicep, the word pod does not appear anywhere, right? So it's not a term that you have to know. It's just underneath it will run in a pod.
Yeah.
But that's
fine.
Well, to take you a little bit back down memory lane, when we started the private preview with this, was back at MVP Summit where we got into contact with the product team. By then it was worker apps, and they did not tell us that it was running Kubernetes underneath.
Yeah.
So we were just thinking, well, finally we have this container lake
the
thingy. We were
serverless way of running containers.
Right. So we were thinking you can do all this cool stuff with it and put one container to run there, one over there, have them collaborate, and if one burns down, another one will pop up. So at least it took me a while to realize that this was in fact just a pod running, and the fact that it's now in the docs would help me save that mistake. So it's also like...
but it depends where you're coming from, right? You know about Kubernetes,
right,
but a lot of developers do not know Kubernetes, but do like a lot of these features, like running your app in 3 instances, and when one fails, have it automatically restart, and those kind of things. Yeah, I want to have those features without knowing Kubernetes.
True.
Maybe we're of a generation that still knows Kubernetes, but in a couple of years, I hope Kubernetes is something that only the cloud providers know about.
Right, yeah. Kubernetes is assembly for the cloud, right? So we need to have C# for the cloud.
Yeah, but that I think Microsoft is aiming that this could be something like that. At least I hope so.
Well, they have been taking it for quite a while. This is the first step in that general direction. How long will it take?
I think 3 to 4 years. It's quite long. But for Kubernetes to disappear as the Kubernetes is currently one of the hottest technologies on cloud infrastructure, I guess. If you're looking at, my opinion, containers have just won, right? Everyone's using containers for everything. So containers are here to stay. Kubernetes might be here to stay, but not for us as developers. For like these technicians at Microsoft who run the cloud, sure, they can still fiddle with Kubernetes as long as we can just, hey, I have an app, throw it into Azure and it will automatically scale and run everywhere, and that's what I would like to see. And I don't think that the initial version of this will have that impact. Although Microsoft is not the only one, right? All the cloud providers are working on these kind of solutions. So I think that's the general direction that we will move into in a couple of years.
I think this is the concurrency battle between the 3 big cloud vendors. I think it's called Google Cloud Run or something like that instead of GCP, and AWS also has a similar service.
Yeah, I can't remember.
And it's probably a big battle. Who's the first to abstract as much away of Kubernetes as possible, but still retain the full feature set? Because that's the trade-off.
And full compatibility.
Yeah, but that's probably the...
Well, so underneath it will probably all use Kubernetes, although it doesn't have to for me, right? If I just have the same features and Microsoft decides to use something else, maybe Service Fabric, right? A lot of stuff in Azure is running Service Fabric. So I don't care if it's abstracted away from me. If I never have to see it, I don't know what is running Cosmos DB. I don't care. As long as the service itself works, right? I just want to have a database. For this, I just want to have my containers run somewhere.
You want to have a container orchestration engine as a service.
Yeah, you want to have all the orchestration features, so you can scale, you can have them automatically restart, all those features.
You can create the environment, so the group of apps which are working together in its internal network. Yeah,
so that the idea I like very much. If the environment would be just a VNet resource in Azure that we could peer to other VNets, then it would be great.
I think that's just a matter of time.
Judging, predicting the future. We have like 11 options to run containers in the cloud right now. Will that number decrease or increase?
Increase. Probably. they never kill services, so ACI is also still here, and this could also replace ACI, Azure Container Instances, because there you could do a simple Docker compose, but couldn't scale to zero. If the pricing is similar, then you could just use container apps. I'm not sure what the pricing for container apps will be, but
okay. So is this product positioned as the replacement for future Kubernetes, or is this just in between, like I introduced
I think it's an in-between product.
Right. So it doesn't...
Because some companies want to have the raw power of Kubernetes with all the options, but then managed as a platform.
Yeah, I hope it will be implement the 80-20 rule, so 80% of the people that currently use Kubernetes could use this, and the 20% of people who want to write their own operators and stuff can still use Kubernetes. But
so it'll, just like you can still write assembly. There's also
nobody does
C#.
it.
I'm curious to see where it goes, because the container apps services in the app service team and not in the AKS team positions inside of Microsoft, inside of the Azure division. So it's interesting to see if it's not going to be assimilated by app services.
It totally depends on politics as well, right? It's not only a
because
technology.
Because app service has a nice abstraction on top of it, where you can configure HTTPS and scaling. Why not?
Yeah. So currently, without the VNet support, I really have a hard time of positioning this versus just app services.
Yeah.
I could just have my app service, a container, run it in app service, and a bunch of app services together would work as well. And I could use some functions for scaling to zero. Could have the same-ish experience. Okay, now my application together has its own network, but that's almost the only value add at this moment.
But you could imagine that they would implement egress as well. So you can define your outgoing routes.
Yeah, but AppService already has that. AppService already has ingress.
Egress.
Egress. Yeah.
Yeah, but just having the ability to connect to private endpoints or VNet, then you're there, right? That's all you need.
Yeah.
So what Microsoft does, looking at how they try to place this, is really focusing this on microservices. That's their goal. They say, well, we think people building microservices should use this. How do you feel about that?
Well, microservices is obviously a very hyped term. A little bit past the top of the hype cycle, but not all the way down yet. So they need to say that because everyone is doing it. So they need to make sure that they adopt this platform.
Yeah.
But it's really doesn't mean a thing, right? Because any container will run on this platform.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what's inside that container, as long as it's a proper container for that operating system.
Yeah.
So as far as I'm concerned, that's just marketing and not so much value. There is, of course, the fact that you can get Dapper with a button click added to your app service, your container apps environment.
Yeah.
That may be like forcing it the wrong way, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I was thinking the same. So it's just, again, pushing Microsoft technology, although Dapper is currently it's adopted by the CNCF as incubation project, but still, it's not, and it is optional, but they on all the documentation, etc., they quite fast point you towards using Dapper. Hey, you want to connect to a database? Oh yeah, you just look on Dapper and use Dapper to connect to the database.
Just to click away and you have Dapper.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so Dapper is quite a nice technology, but for me it could be completely separate from these kind of infrastructure solutions.
Yeah.
If you Microsoft positions this as an opinionated way of running your cluster, right? So Envoy is there, Keda is there, Dapper is there. Yeah, you can't change Envoy to another solution, right? So that's just what you get out of the box, and it's abstracted away for you. So I don't care that much that it's Envoy, but some people that really want to have something else.
Tough luck.
Yeah, well, they should still use Kubernetes.
Yeah, but the depot part is kind of, you have depot or not. You can't choose a different framework.
No, there's no additional way to add sidecars.
You can add sidecars by adding a second container
Inside of pod. Yeah, but that
inside the deployment.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But they could have done the same for Dapper. Instead of making the service option, they could also have a documentation page saying, if you want to use Dapper, then you just add Dapper inside
But I think what they will do actually beneath the surface is that they add a Dapper container to your environment and it's running
on the fly.
On the fly.
Yeah, like the injection that Istio does, for example.
Yeah, with the magic.
Yeah, the magic namespace label, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Dapper, I think just because this is still an innovation project, running now in a preview, Dapper came out of the same group of people or working closely together. I think that's also politics and marketing wise, they just grouped that together. It could also be a jumping board for adoption of Dapper later on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But can you also choose the runtime environment, for example, Linux or Windows, or is it just Linux at the moment?
Currently, it's only Linux. But I
because
think
that could be a big point if you can if they can introduce an environment in which you can run both Windows and Linux containers in the same deployment.
It will probably you could do it, right? It could be different apps running on different. If there was Windows support, right? There's no Windows support now, but they shouldn't be too hard to add that for them. But I think how many people are using Windows containers? That's really a low percentage.
No.
If you look at all the Kubernetes
if you look at a
Okay.
certain part of the population which are using VMs to run their microservices, those companies could be an ideal candidate of moving their workloads to Azure Container Apps.
Yeah, but I think for the server environment, the Linux workloads have won. Like the more of 60% or so from the VMs, I think Microsoft says it themselves, run Linux-based workloads.
Yeah, that's
So
60% of all the VMs.
Yeah, all the VMs. So they're slowly ditching the Windows support. Like Linux is also being positioned as a development environment inside of your Windows operating system with the BSL runtime. So they want you to make Linux-based apps.
Right. Yeah.
So they can also be compete better with Amazon.
Yeah.
And
I have a question from the audience, from Matthijs. Going a bit back to the where we're going in the future. Should computer science students today that still are in learning now, should they learn Kubernetes or should they skip it already?
True.
Which education is it?
Well, just computer science.
Computer science in general? Okay.
Yeah.
I think they should learn the concepts of Kubernetes.
Yeah, I don't think so.
The basic concepts. For example, we have this container orchestration,
Mhm.
so that you learn the fundamentals of the technology below it.
I would say maybe it's the same answer, but they need to know about containers. They need to know about orchestration, but not about Kubernetes, which is just an implementation of orchestration.
Okay,
Yeah,
but
I
it's
would-
de facto implementation.
Yeah, but there are multiple, there's a range of orchestrators to choose from. So why not just stick with the concept and then say these are the options and go nuts? That's my opinion, right? But
Yeah, I think especially when you're still at your study, you need to learn about concepts, and the details will be different anyways in a couple of years. Even if you learn Kubernetes in 4 years will look totally different as well. So learning the
Other
details.
color at the command prompt.
right. Yeah.
No, but so it will be different. So I think learning about the concept, learning about containers is smart in general as well, because that's just a concept that's became a de facto standard for our industry, I guess. So looking at the time, we only have a couple of minutes left. Do we have some other? Let me see if there are some other questions from the chat. Now only some people representing the Windows container groups. So
Just a couple of.
couple of them.
there's always some people who want to run
Windows containers.
Containers and have pain. But for that, there's not that
It's
much
Roy.
questions anymore. So with that, I think this was our first episode of Xpirit Talks. We'll be back in a month and we'll do a completely different topic, different speakers, maybe a different host. Who knows? So see you in a month.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.